In 1985, when ocean explorer Robert Ballard and his team finally discovered the wreck of the Titanic deep in the Atlantic Ocean, they described the moment as stepping into a time capsule. Plates, shoes, wine bottles, even children's toys lay scattered across the ocean floor, perfectly preserved by the freezing waters. It was a haunting reminder of one of history's greatest maritime disasters. But to truly understand why the Titanic remains etched in memory more than a century later, we have to go back to 1912, when this so-called unsinkable ship set sail on her first and only voyage. Section 1. The birth of a giant, the Titanic was born out of competition. At the time, the Cunard Line dominated transatlantic travel with the fastest ships afloat. In response, White Star Line decided they wouldn't compete in speed but in size and luxury. And so, 3 massive liners were planned: the Olympic, the Britannic, and the Titanic. The Titanic was the pride of the fleet. At nearly 900 feet long, she was the largest moving object ever built by human hands. Newspapers called her a floating palace, while engineers marveled at her technology. The ship wasn't just transportation, it was a statement of progress, wealth, and human achievement. Section 2. The floating palace. Step onto the Titanic in April 1912, and you'd feel like you were entering a grand hotel. First-class passengers enjoyed luxuries unheard of at sea. A gym, squash courts, a heated swimming pool, Turkish baths, and fine dining rivaling New York's top restaurants. The famous grand staircase, lit by a glass dome, became a symbol of the ship's elegance. But Titanic also carried hundreds of immigrants in third class, packed into modest cabins deep below decks. For them, the ship wasn't about luxury, it was about hope. Many were headed to the United States in search of new lives, dreams of opportunity waiting in places like New York and Chicago. The ship reflected society itself, the privileged on the upper decks and hardworking families below. Section 3. Unsinkable confidence. One of Titanic's most striking features was her safety design. She had 16 watertight compartments, and it was believed she could survive if as many as 4 flooded. This led journalists and even crew members to call her practically unsinkable. That confidence would soon prove fatal. Because of it, safety rules were brushed aside. Titanic carried only 20 lifeboats, enough for just over half the people on board, and far fewer than she actually needed. Section 4. The maiden voyage begins on April 10, 1912. Titanic set sail from Southampton, England. She made stops in Cherbourg, France, and Queenstown, Ireland, before heading toward her final destination, New York City. On board were over 2,200 people. Millionaires like John Jacob Astor IV and Isidor Straus, as well as poor families from Ireland, Scandinavia, and Eastern Europe. For the wealthy, it was a glamorous journey. For immigrants, it was a leap toward the American dream. For 4 days, the Titanic sailed smoothly across the Atlantic. Passengers dined, danced, and marveled at the ship's luxury. But beneath the celebrations, warnings of danger were already coming in. Section 5. Iceberg ahead. As Titanic steamed westward, she received at least 6 iceberg warnings from nearby ships. But the North Atlantic was calm that night, the sea like glass, making icebergs hard to spot. At 11:40 p.m. on April 14th, lookout Frederick Fleet saw a massive iceberg looming directly ahead. He rang the warning bell and shouted, "Iceberg! Right ahead!" The officers on the bridge ordered a sharp turn. Titanic began to swing, but she wasn't agile enough. The iceberg scraped along her starboard side, opening gashes beneath the waterline. The damage stretched across 5 compartments, one too many for the ship to survive. Section 6. The sinking. At first, many passengers didn't realize the danger. The collision felt like a bump. Some even joked about it. But as the minutes passed, water poured in. Captain Edward Smith and his officers quickly understood the grim truth. The Titanic would sink, and she would sink fast. Orders were given to uncover the lifeboats. But there weren't enough for everyone, and many crew members were unsure of evacuation procedures. The rule became women and children first. Yet early on, many lifeboats were launched half-empty. Some with only a few dozen people when they could hold 6.5. As the bow sank lower, panic spread. The rich and the poor, once separated by class and luxury, now shared the same desperate fate. Bands continued to play music to calm passengers. famously ending with the hymn "Nearer, My God, to Thee." By 2:20 a.m. on April 15th, the Titanic broke apart and disappeared beneath the waves. Over 1,500 people were lost. Only about 700 survived, rescued hours later by the ship Carpathia. Section 7. Aftermath and Legacy. The disaster shocked the world. In the United States, the Senate launched an inquiry, while Britain held its own investigation. Testimonies revealed how lifeboats went out half-filled, how warnings were ignored, and how safety regulations lagged far behind technology. The tragedy led to sweeping changes. New rules requiring enough lifeboats for all passengers, 24-hour radio communication on ships, and the creation of the International Ice Patrol to monitor iceberg dangers in the Atlantic. The Titanic became more than a shipwreck. It became a symbol of human overconfidence and the fragility of life. It also became a story of bravery. Crew members who stayed behind, musicians who played to the end, and passengers who gave up their spots in lifeboats so others could live. Conclusion: today, the Titanic rests 2.5 miles beneath the surface of the Atlantic. Though more than a century has passed, her story continues to capture imaginations, not just because of the scale of the disaster, but because it speaks to something universal. The Titanic was built as a triumph of modern engineering, yet one iceberg reminded the world that no human achievement is invincible. In the end, her story is not only about tragedy at sea, it's about ambition, hope, courage, and the lessons we still carry forward.